right, welcome back everyone to the Red, White, and Matt Show with Kenny. Today is episode number 38. We're going to be covering the Astrazaneca vaccine and then the different vaccine rates per country, kind of comparing them. Also going to be discussing the new tax hikes, which Biden is expected to announce sometime. And then also more into the Cuomo scandal and getting into that. So first, let's go ahead and get started.
We will start with the pandemic, of course, we are still in the middle of, despite some of the pictures you've been seeing from around the country. Let's start with the numbers from Johns Hopkins University. More than 119.8 million diagnosed cases of coronavirus worldwide. More than 534,000 American lives lost here to this virus. CDC reporting, though, now 107 million doses of vaccine have been administered from coast to coast.
Yeah, let's talk about vaccines, Jen, because we know here in this country, the FDA has approved 3. There may be more coming, but there is news now and concern about a vaccine in Europe. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this was the big news over the last couple of days coming out of Europe, and it has to do with the Astrazaneca Oxford vaccine. So take a look at what's going on right now with that. First of all, this is right now authorized in over 70 countries worldwide. We expect they will be submitting their phase 3 clinical trial data to the FDA for emergency use authorization in the next couple of weeks. Technology is different than the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine. This one uses an inactive viral vector, really tried and true. And the concern now, even after more than 17 million doses have been given in the European Union and the UK, is this possible increased risk of clotting. An evaluation of the data with all those doses administered reveals at this point no increased risk of clotting. And we're talking about a blood clot in the leg or the lung.
You said possible, but there are actual cases that have been reported.
Right, and this is what's so important, you guys, because remember, clots, DVTs, pulmonary embolism, they happen and they will continue to happen. As we vaccinate hundreds of millions of people, we will see those clots in some people who have gotten the vaccine. So far with this vaccine, 15 cases of DVT, that's a blood clot in the leg or pelvis, 22 cases of blood clots in the lungs. Right now, World Health Organization and the UK saying this is not higher than that background rate, so they see no reason to pause the administration of this vaccine in Europe.
Background rate, you've been talking about that from the very beginning of the vaccine.
That's the key word.
All right, Dr. Ashton, thank you.
Okay, can you say whitewash? I mean, obviously, okay, so they were talking out of both sides of their mouth there, right? Okay, so obviously there was a reason that, you know, an entire country basically got together and said, you know what, there's something up with this vaccine that we're giving people. Maybe we should pause it for just a second, right? Okay, I understand background levels, right? And that's just another way of saying, well, they could have gotten blood clots anyway, so we're not going to attribute it to the vaccine, right? But it's just kind of like a heart attack. If somebody is perfectly healthy and you jab them in the arm and 24 hours later, they're crouching over from a heart attack, you have to ask the question, if that happens enough, is it tied to the vaccine? That's exactly what they did. They said, look, you know, we're giving these people the vaccine. All of a sudden, people who don't have a history of blood clotting issues now have an issue, okay? So maybe it's tied to it, maybe it's not. But there is significant evidence to say, look, every time we do this, this happens, or a certain percentage of this happens, then you step back and say, okay, what's really going on here? Is it maybe they're allergic to a part of it in there? Is it reacting with something weird that shouldn't be reacting with them weird? I mean, we don't know. It's just, you know, okay, we're seeing something here and now we're going to be cautious about it, right? But as far as that article is like, you know, complete whitewash, it's like, okay, you got an issue there now. You're just trying to say, it's kind of like the whole issue of like the deaths. Well, we gave, you know, 1 million doses and 100 people died within you know, 24 hours, right? Well, they could have died anyway. Yeah, they could have died, but that doesn't mean the vaccine didn't cause it. That makes sense? So that's what the doctors are saying. It's like, okay, there's something there that made us question it. So it's just like,
yeah.
Okay.
To me, it's completely hilarious because they're basically like admitting, yeah, we got this vaccine, like it beats COVID. Some people might die from blood clots, but like we knew that was going to happen. And it's like one of those, like, I guess at least with the Moderna and Pfizer, like we don't have this issue where it's like, oh yeah, by the way, guys, like you could die from this vaccine. So you know what I mean? Like I don't know. Is it better that way, or should it be the evidence is covered up and then there's just a
Well, it's
potential
like two or
risk of
three
something
episodes ago.
happening?
Like 2-3 episodes, we talked about it. Where they were saying, well, was the death rate above the normal, right? So they're trying to shove all these deaths as well. Normally 12,000 people a month die. So if you still get 12,000 a month die, that's your background number. You can't really attribute that to the vaccine, right? And I understand that to a point, but you have a significant amount of the population not out doing things that they would normally do that they could have died from something else, right? So just because you had the same 12,000 a month die in this particular state or whatever, that doesn't mean it wasn't caused by the vaccine. It's just saying, well, we're going to ignore it because a certain amount of the population would have died anyway. If you have somebody who's perfectly healthy for any other reason, all of a sudden he kills over, something caused that. So it's not just you have a background amount of deaths. There's a causation for those deaths. Are they dying particularly from vehicle accidents, blunt force trauma, falling off ladders, or is there a significant amount of that 12,000 that would have died from car accidents and now they're dying 24 hours to 48 hours after getting, I'm just making those numbers up, a percentage of time after they get this vaccine, right? Okay, so that makes a difference. And just to shove it all into background numbers to me, is dishonest. So we'll go and roll the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like a really weird situation because we're literally at the point where we're asking, like what's better. But at the end of the day, you really have to weigh the risk. Do you want the vaccine? If you get the vaccine, I guess, especially in these European countries, it also kind of feel like there's a power play going on in terms of, maybe was there some type of funding maybe thrown at the European countries by a different vaccine company that wants to maybe get a little bit more room in the market for them, get a little bit more of those dollars or those European, what's the name for them right now? I'm blanking on it. The euros.
I forget you, but
the euros. Yeah.
That makes an interesting question. Was that story of blood clots? Was that floated out as a form of information terrorism? Basically, information terrorism.
Kind of like,
but we talked about this the first couple episodes. Right? Yeah, we talked about this, early on. If there was a particular issue with the vaccine in a small subset of the population, would they try and hide that for the quote greater good of everybody getting the vaccine? I think the answer is becoming plainly obvious. The answer is yes, but we'll find it out.
All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to look at the vaccination rates and sure. So we have like 400 million total doses administered. So it's like 5.2 doses for every 100 people. Let's see. I don't know if these maps are going to load for us well. But if this map was here, maybe it'll load. The U.S. is just rocking it. This goes back to like people that complain about like the expensive medical care in the U.S. It's like, okay, well, it's expensive medical care, but if you're really like into science, like, a lot of people claim, especially on the left, like, hey, I mean, if you're into science, I mean, stay in the U.S. if you believe in it, because we're the ones that are, really getting ahead of everyone, right? And then really,
and medical cost is relative, right? Like we look at, $5 a day in America doesn't buy you lunch, right? But in many places of the world, $3 a day will buy everything a family needs.
Yeah.
So, okay, you're spending $100 a month, or a week in this case in America for health insurance. Well, okay, if you're spending $1 or $2 a month in some of these other countries, that is a significant portion of their income. So I want to look at percentages of income. And now America, if you even break it down by percentages, is pretty high. We spend a particularly large chunk of our monthly income on housing, food, and medical.
So like you can see the charts here. These are just doses administered per 100. So like all these are like super tiny countries. I'd say like Chile maybe is one of the exceptions to it, which is pretty awesome. I'm surprised Chile is doing such a great job. Think they got some kind of medical connection with us, huh?
I'm pretty sure they do.
Yeah, and the UK.
We brought this up a while back. It's like, okay, you know, if you drop 100,000 doses, you know, on some island in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
you have a much higher percentage chance of having more vaccinations than a country of 350 million.
Yeah. I mean, like literally, look. So we're like not too far down the list, right?
COVID.
But look at the number of people we vaccinated, dude. 113 million. Like that is insane. Like the UK is the closest to us, and I'll note on the UK here in a minute. I'm gonna kind of hate on them a little bit. UK only has 27 million, so it's like 38% of their population, dude. We're at 22%. I'm gonna tell you this much. You know, the US is gonna like be way ahead of everybody, dude. Like at the end of this vaccine race, like I'm telling you, we're gonna be. I don't see China on here, Kenny. Do you see China? I don't see China. That's weird.
I didn't even know they had a successful one yet. Doesn't matter.
Well, they
I mean,
claim
like
they
everything
claim
else
they do. They claim they do. Remember, we went over their vaccine. Let's see. So here's like doses administered per 100, and then they have like share of the population. Let me skip this chart. So here's by continent. This is kind of an interesting one. So like North America, Europe. So the weird thing is Asia. Look how like low Asia is 3.3 per 100. North America is 21. Literally like what is that? 7 times the amount of them, which that's I don't know.
Well, that's another question we should ask is
Here's the vaccine
what is
breakdown.
the death rate over there in a lot of those Asian countries? I don't hear them doing it much lockdown either.
Mm-hmm. So here's the vaccines: Oxford's AstraZeneca, Pfizer, BioNTech, Moderna. The top 3 have most of the vaccines. There's your Sputnik. You look at, I guess Mexico has multiple vaccines that they bought. Sputnik, those actually kind of up there. Sinopharm Beijing. So there's Sinovac. There's the other one from China. So those were the big ones. I did see one earlier too. Let's see if I can bring it up again. It's a share of population vaccinated. Yes. Okay, so this is an interesting one I was going to say about the UK. So this is at least 1 dose versus fully vaccinated, okay? So like everyone's about the same percentage. Like Israel is like pretty much the same for their cases. But then even the United States, you know, we're all about like basically like half of the people I've gotten vaccinated have got at least one vaccine is the general breakdown for most of them, except for the UK. The UK has like, I don't even know what that number is. 10% basically have got one vaccine and then, or sorry, almost a lot of people have got one vaccine, but only like 10% have got both. So they're like extremely behind on that. So they're doing a different approach here. They're doing, hey, you at least got one. And if you ask me, my experience with the vaccine is, I think you should probably get both because the first one seemed to not really do too much. Second one, you know, you're kind of out there for about a day. So I don't know. I don't think the UK is doing it right. If you're going to get both, I think you got to get them quickly and not. That tells me there's probably also people that are still waiting to get their second one. And I think you have to get them within a month or something like that. So just something to note with the UK.
You know, going from what I know about, you know, how coronaviruses work and the vaccines on them. Okay, so I understand if the UK came out and said it is better for us to take people's second dose of vaccine and give everybody a margin of coverage than it is to fully vaccinate a smaller portion of the population, right? Because, you know, we talked about this before. You know, the reason we've never really had a successful coronavirus vaccine, I mean, almost everything on the market has been about a 65 to 70% chance of it, you know, actually working for the average population. This is why, and the coverage only lasts on average, you know, 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes as much as 8 weeks, right? And that's due to the nature of the coronavirus and the antibodies that the body produces. So, okay, maybe what they're thinking is if we can get a large portion of our population mildly covered for a month to month and a half, we can bring our overall spike down, you know, in the amount of cases. So I understand why they're doing it. And on the flip side, it's like, okay, let's say, you know, we get everybody in America 100% coverage, right? Well, by the time everybody in America gets coverage, all the people who got covered or the vaccine, early on, now they are in a window where they can recapture, right? And I think that's going to be interesting. So to see which one of these two different methods ends up actually working out. So.
Welcome back. So every spending spree ends in a bill, whether it's at the mall, a restaurant, or on Capitol Hill. Eventually, the check comes due. Now that Joe Biden's massive $1.9 trillion spending plan, which is being paraded as a COVID relief package, is now law, Democrats will begin working on their other passion, raising taxes. Sources have been telling me for weeks that President Biden is expected to keep his campaign promise and very soon announce the largest tax hike in 3 decades, a massive $4 trillion increase, which will include raising the corporate tax from 21 to 28%. It will also raise the capital gains tax on certain individuals from 20% currently to 39.6%. It will raise taxes on the wealthiest and the highest earners. But what exactly does wealthy mean to the Democrats? That is being debated right now. It is very possible that U.S. companies and those making $400,000 or more a year will initially foot the bill for this stimulus. And remember, only 10% of the plan is actually COVID-related. But the tax writers may want to remember one basic fact. Money is mobile, and money will go where it is treated best. We see that over and over again. Remember back in 2017 when President Trump passed his Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which took tax rates down for every income level and brought the corporate rate down from President Obama's 35% rate to 21%, which made the United States competitive with the rest of the world. Almost immediately, we watched companies increase spending on R&D and other expenditures. We saw businesses pick up hiring, sending the unemployment rate down to a record 3.5% by the beginning of 2020. We saw the economy grow and the stock market rally for several years, and in doing so, it lifted Americans' wealth. We saw the opposite under President Obama's 35% corporate rate. That triggered a string of acquisitions from American companies of Irish companies. The corporate rate in Ireland under the Obama administration was 9% in Ireland, causing American companies to acquire companies in Ireland, move their headquarters to Ireland, and enjoy that 9% rate instead of the 35% they were seeing at home. Money is mobile because people are mobile. Why else would we now see droves of individuals moving out of New York and other high-tax states and take their salaries with them to enjoy no state income tax in Florida and Texas? And a quick word about that capital gains tax. If you made money in stocks this past year, and I bet many of you did, you're going to share your earnings with the government. It's just a question of how much. I'll ask you this. If you knew that you would be charged 20% by selling your stock in 2021, or almost 40% in 2022, when would you want to sell your portfolio? The answer is obvious. If everyone tries to beat a 2022 deadline, expect a massive stock market sell-off before the ink is even dry. We know the Democrats love to use the tired phrases of pay your fair share and tax the rich, because these one-liners seem to resonate with the populace. But the truth is, the highest earners have been and continue to pay more than their fair share. The Tax Foundation says that the top 10% of earners pay 70% of all income tax. Of course, there are those companies that have been able to get around the tax altogether by hiring leading tax attorneys and using every trick in the book to pay as little as possible legally because they can afford to hire as many tax attorneys as they need because money is mobile. The Biden administration might want to lose the one-liners and instead focus on America's bottom line. Everyone knows whether you are the biggest of corporations or the smallest of households or the leading superpower in the world, if you want to get your financial house in order, step one is stop digging the hole. Stop overspending. Stop jamming expensive provisions into an emergency spending package that has nothing to do with the emergency you claim to be dealing with. The Biden administration has already made the mistake of reversing all of Trump's immigration policies simply because they were from President Trump. And like we've said for months, they created a crisis at our border. We have already seen the impact that bad policy has had on high-tax states. The Biden administration ought to learn from those mistakes and remember that money is mobile and hopefully think twice before causing an economic crisis as well. This tax increase will be another crisis of Joe Biden's making. Democrats will have to own this because, just like the $1.9 trillion spending package, they will try to pass this tax increase without a single Republican vote. The question is, if we don't try to hold them accountable, will they even care?
In 2020, I just did my taxes, right? I made like a couple $1,000s more than I made in 2019. And I paid a couple $1,000s more in taxes. So if there was a tax break, I don't know where it went, right? So that's what I mean by, like, Trump says a lot of good things. It didn't end up manifesting, in a lot of ways. At least it didn't for me, from what I was able to see, right? But I mean, she's right on like the Democrats' tax plan, and them putting all their little funny bills in there. And it boils down about into this. Okay, so the Democrats in particular are really bad about equal outcome instead of equal opportunity, right? So even if that means the outcome is everybody's poorer than the poorest person, So instead of creating an opportunity base where, like, hey, we're gonna create the conditions for you to be successful, maybe even to a certain point, right? So, well, you can be successful, you just can't make more than $400,000, right? But what they do is they try to make everybody, equally poor, whether they intentionally do it or not. That's what their programs actually end up doing. It separates the people who have money and can go out there and lobby to get certain laws done a certain way, the way they are. Nancy Pelosi's got a bill on her desk, and it's going to cost her $1 million to pass that. I can almost guarantee you that bill's not going to get passed, right? So you end up with the have and the have-nots. You have the select few who either make the system and or have the ability to influence the system or hire people to run through all the loops to make that system work for them. And then you have everybody else who just doesn't make enough to qualify for all those examples. Like, okay, so like if you got to have like 100 employees to take advantage of a certain tax program, well, you just cut out everybody who's got 99. Are you going to make, like the relief package money that they sent out, right? Where you had to have XYZ amount of money flowing through banks in order to qualify for any of that stuff, right? So basically it excluded, the big players from everybody else. Everybody else couldn't get a hold of the sweetheart loans because they didn't have a pre-existing business relationship with the 6 banks who got the money. So they handed it out to their buddies and everybody else got shafted and left holding the bill. So, and I understand, on a certain percentage, it's easier to force everybody to the next lower rung than it is to bring people up. And that's why I say 50% correct, because she's partially correct and partially, I'm struggling for the word on this, where I'll let you go over and say
Okay.
thoughts on that.
So number one, I want to note, so when I first saw this whole tax hike is what it was labeled on like multiple news outlets, even on some of the left, actually, surprisingly. The number one tax hike, like, that's first of all super misleading for everyone that like begins to read it, because you're like, oh well, I guess they're going to increase taxes on all of us, even though Biden said he wasn't going to, right? But then you look into the tax hike thing, and it's really talking about people that make a bit more money, right? So it's like the corporate tax rate is going to go back up to like what it used to be, like under Obama. And then comes the question of, how effective are these tax rates going to be? And it's just like she noted, yeah, it's going to definitely come out of their pockets at the start, but then it's a question of, are these companies going to start leaving again? Because only a few moved back under Trump whenever he adjusted that tax rate. So it wasn't like a bunch of companies decided to move back to the US, because I'm sure a lot of companies too were thinking, well, this might be nice under Trump, but this isn't going to last, right? I mean, it's obvious. So a lot of them, just stayed overseas anyway, because they knew, hey, the tax rate's probably going to go back up anyway, so might as well stay here. So, and this is one of those things where literally, unless there's like some type of international agreement, which I don't know if there ever will be, because the thing is, there's a lot of countries benefiting with these low tax rates, like especially Ireland. They're getting the tax money. So for them, they're like, whatever. I don't want to make some agreement where we make, or companies, make them, whatever the agreement may be, like they're forced to stay in their home country or whatever it is, or where we make the corporate tax rate like equal across the world. I don't think that'll happen. I don't even think that'll happen in the United States. They could try that here too, state to state. I'd be surprised if they did, if they pulled that off. I think there's just too much corporate wealth, too much lobbying. So like, cause that's kind of like the ideal way to fix that, but I don't think that'll happen. So it's just like,
I was trying to go on the.
So I think these companies will just continue to like, go around. She said money is mobile, which 100%. Yep, that's true. And it's like the Democrats don't realize, they keep trying to be like, we need to get the 1% under control. But it's like, until you fix the tax code, you're not going to get them under control. It's like, that is a issue. Peter Schiff even talked about it. He's like, look, he's like, you guys trying to like tax the 1%. It's not that they're not illegally avoiding taxes. They're legally avoiding taxes. And that's the issue. So that's the problem you have to fix if you really want to, effectively tax these people. So they are paying taxes. It's just a question of how much you want to tax them. So yeah, it's like, number one, do we need an infrastructure bill? Yes, we do. Like, our infrastructure is falling apart. And if you look at it, like, the longer it keeps going, we're literally losing more and more money because we're not as efficient. But at the same time, another way to fix it is by manufacturing more of our own stuff. Okay, so like, if you're importing a lot of crap from China like we are, yes, you're going to need more ports. Yeah, you're going to need more infrastructure. But guess what? If we're doing it here, then we're probably only going to have to maybe, I don't know, repair railways. So like, maybe that's your only cost, maybe more road maintenance, which is a lot cheaper, I think, than like a naval port or something like that. Same thing with airplanes. Like, airplanes are ran by private industry, so it's like we don't have to repair that. Maybe the runways or something, but these things I feel like are a lot cheaper than like doing ports and things like that. So I think we need to adjust our priorities. And once again, Republicans just not getting on top of it. The only thing they want to say is, well, you better not get rid of the filibusters, like Mitch McConnell's response to this. And it's like, okay, what, and if they do, then what? Like, what are you going to do? Like, the Republicans are so weak. Like, the leaders in Congress are so weak. Like, I don't even know what they're doing, dude. And this is why I'm not part of the Republican Party, besides some of the political stances. I'm just like, the Republican leaders we have, some of the newer leaders are not that bad. But like, some of these old dogs that are still in there are just like, they need to leave because they're just sitting around. They're like, oh, I know how to operate and stuff like that. But they're just like so loaded with corporate money. I'm just like, dude, get out, because you're basically just representing a corporation at this point. I mean, that's what it is. You have no solutions. You just say and do the same old thing. So just my take.
You hit the point that I was trying to spit out, right? Okay, so the reason she was only partially correct is because, one, the Democrats have no problem, and this is what they're doing, using the tax code to force policy change. You basically to force people to change their habits, right? So regardless of the consequences, because they don't care about the consequences, for the most part, they want the law, they want people to act a certain way, and they're just using the tax code to do it. But on the flip side, a lot of the things Trump did not manifest in what we were told it was manifesting. You know what I'm saying? So, Joe Biden got rid of a bunch of, quote, tax cuts and stuff, was looking to get rid of it. But those tax cuts it didn't change anything. And one reason it didn't change anything is because the point you hit on, if it's not stable, you're not going to move $1 billion or $1 trillion worth of inventory and manufacturing to a country that every 2 years, you don't know what your tax liability is going to be, right? Where you can go to some third world country, give the local warlord 10% of everything you make, and you can do whatever the hell you want, right? The warlord's happy, the company's happy. The people working for that company half the time are happy, right? So it's not in their interest to get into, an international agreement, just like you mentioned, to change what they're happy with, right? Everybody's benefiting over there. And, they're not going to, and that brings up another thing. Okay. And we brought this up, a couple episodes ago, where if your government is putting the rights and citizens of another country above its own, it's not your government. It's not legitimate. So, and I think this is kind of what ticks people off. It's like, okay, so you have the Democrats, especially the Democrats. It's bad under the Republicans, not only making policy, that doesn't, doesn't benefit the normal American population, but they do those things and it benefits for other countries. And I think they know they do it. So other countries just be like, you know what, we're not getting involved with that. We're not going to touch it. Now, those people can do whatever they're going to do.
President Biden says New York Governor Cuomo should step down if an investigation confirms that he did indeed commit any kind of sexual harassment. The president spoke to ABC News in an exclusive interview tonight.
Here's my position. It's been my position since I wrote the Violence Against Women Act. A woman should be presumed to telling the truth and should not be scapegoated and become victimized by her coming forward, number one. But there should be an investigation to determine whether what she says is true. That's what's going on.
Governor Cuomo did spend part of the day visiting a mass vaccination site in his state. His aides say he is focused still on the pandemic as well as the state's budget. News Nation correspondent Tom Negevin is in New York with the impeachment proceedings. The latest details on that related to the governor. Tom?
Well, actually in Albany, the New York State Capitol tonight, Rob. And yes, Assembly members here very focused on their own tasks as well. On that budget, working without the governor right now, but also on hiring a couple of lawyers this week to lead the Assembly's impeachment investigation of the governor, who, as you mentioned, keeping a low profile, looking at a COVID vaccine distribution site focused on that and on the state's recovery, we're told, from the COVID pandemic.
He won't resign, continues to insist he never touched anyone inappropriately or meant to make anyone feel uncomfortable. But more than 130 New York lawmakers want Andrew Cuomo gone, including the Democratic leader of the state Senate.
I made my opinion clear that I think the governor should resign because, again, there's just so many allegations.
7 women are accusing the 3-term governor of sexual harassment or inappropriate touching, including several who worked for him. Ex-aide Lindsey Boylan tweeting today about the harassment she's been getting online, in many cases, she says, from other women. Tonight, a new Siena College poll shows the majority of New York voters do not believe the governor should resign, consistent with polling done by News Nation 2 weeks ago. With a state budget due April 1st, lawmakers have been working without him.
Because of these allegations, the governor has lost the confidence of his governing partners and of many New Yorkers, and he should step down.
Along with the state assembly's impeachment investigation, the New York Attorney General's investigating the harassment allegations, and the Department of Justice is months into a probe of the administration's handling of COVID in state nursing homes, underreporting of deaths, and holding back life and death information from the very people who may now decide Andrew Cuomo's political fate.
When we are not given certain kinds of information after we've demanded it for over a year, it makes it so that we are blindfolded and handcuffed.
Cuomo accuser Charlotte Bennett met with investigators for 4 hours yesterday. Her lawyer tells us, producing about 120 pages of documents supporting her allegations. Another Cuomo accuser, Anna Liss, expected to meet with investigators later this week.
I think the poll is the most interesting part of that, because there's obviously some sort of disconnect, right? So the poll was like, should Cuomo resign immediately, is essentially the question. 50% said no, but yet you have all of the media, literally all the media, and the Democrats in the state, literally the state Senate leader for New York, calling on him to resign. So first of all, it's not to say that he shouldn't resign. I think he should have resigned or been prosecuted for the nursing home thing, first of all, foremost. Now that allegations, yeah, sure, of course, the Me Too movement, that I guess Democrats, and here's my thing, Democrats pick and choose who they want the Me Too movement to apply to. So if it's, President Trump's time, they want it to apply to, pretty much everyone. President Biden gets in, now we're picking and choosing, and basically they're seeing Cuomo now as basically they're Jesus who's going to take the sacrifice for them, right? That's what I see. I see them as, we're we're now like the party of virtue, and we need someone to show that yes, we stand for all women. Like, look, we'll even sacrifice one of our own, right? Um, and that's exactly what it's doing. It's virtue signaling. Not to say that the situation isn't wrong, but they picked their victim that they thought was most fit, and now they're going after this person. So, like, I think even Governor Newsom, I think, has had similar accusations or something like that. But Newsom and Cuomo are like very similar, honestly, if you really look at it. Yet they're going after Cuomo. I think that's because he decided to do the nursing home cover-ups, and then apparently that's coming out of some of these other Democrat states, by the way, too, like Michigan. So just as a heads up, it's just, I think that's a female governor, so I don't think there's any sexual assault allegations to go along with it. So this is the person they've chosen to sacrifice, and here we are. And all of the media, like I said, is going after him. He's still not deciding to resign. I don't know if they'll actually get him impeached. I haven't looked into it that far. Don't really care too much about it. Maybe he will be, maybe he won't. I don't think he will end up getting impeached. I think he'll just, end up doing his term and then, stopping at that point. But Kenny, what do you have to add on this?
Again, I think it's more complex than they're liking to talk about. Okay, so I agree pretty much with everything you said on there. And I think a lot of it boils down to the Democrats are eating their own, right? So they don't have Trump to feast on. Now they got to feast on one of their own. And, Cuomo happens to be the old white dude who may or may have bad hand problems. But saying that, I'm wondering if part of the reason they're trying to get rid of him this way is kind of like a graceful exit. They can say he resigned over allegations of mishandling his local staff instead of the real issue, which other Democrat states are fully in favor of, putting sick people in nursing homes until they, croak or whatever. And I've said it before, if you ask me, all that was getting rid of the useless eaters. The pension, they all have pension problems, right? And if you're paying $6,000 to $8,000 per old folks in an old folks home, because that's part of their pension. Well, if you get rid of a couple thousand of them, that really helps your pension, right? I think that was more or less what they were really doing. And that is what everybody in the Communist Party and liberal parties have, look forward to. Right now, you're young and vibrant, and they're going to give you everything you need and want to keep being young, vibrant, and producing goods for the state. The second you're old and they don't have a use for you, they'll set you with a bunch of sick people until you croak, right? But that's a whole other issue. As far as him resigning, I don't think it's appropriate for him to resign, right? Because I'm gonna put the same filter I'm gonna put for everybody else. Okay, if I can get powerful people to resign simply by accusing them of misconduct, right? I'm gonna find every bimbo on Wall Street or Main Street will take $50 to make an accusation, right? That don't mean it's true. So I want to know if these people were one in a position, and I'm not trying to discredit the women or whatever, because I don't know anything about them. But you have to understand from a political standpoint, if somebody's willing to go find 5 or 10 women, give them $500 or $1,000, or convince them that they were mistreated by this guy, whether they were or were not, from a political standpoint, you have to assume somebody's going to do it, right, for their own benefit. So, and this comes into, okay, well, is it fair to demand him to resign because, there were allegations, nothing was proven, right? Cuomo could be perfectly innocent or he could be perfectly guilty, either or. But until he's given a fair chance, I don't think it's appropriate for him to resign over that issue. Now, for the nursing home issue, yeah, you should have been probably shot for that. Because if you didn't know you're going to put sick people in nursing homes that it wasn't going to spread, you're just an idiot and incompetent, right? And borderline, criminal negligence there. But, going back to the issues, like, okay, so, did this, just say, I'm just going to pick on like one woman, right? Okay, she was there for like 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 6 years, and it's just now coming out. I'm less liable to believe somebody worked with them for 20 years and it's just now coming out. And I'm also less likely to believe somebody worked there for 1 day. Maybe she just got the bad vibe. So I don't think it's appropriate. I think it needs an investigation. It needs a fair investigation, just like anybody else. I want to stack the evidence off to one side, and put the person on the other, and let it weigh out. Because if it's fair, if the information is accurate and fair, it shouldn't matter who the person is getting tried just because you like them or don't like them. And we need to look at the evidence and say, okay, does that evidence make sense? Is it plausible? Is it reasonable? And not just like, well, I don't like the guy, so I'm going to go ahead and believe that evidence. You know what I'm saying? I think we need to step back and be like, okay, what is the right thing to do here?
All right, so let's wrap this up. Basically, Kenny's saying he agrees with Biden for once in his life.
Biden was very cautious about saying,
he was, yeah.
What did Biden actually say? Let's look at the evidence first. Of course, so he's protecting his buddy instead of like the other people just throwing him straight under the bus, right? So, I mean, I understand it, but if at a fundamental level, you have to agree with Biden on that. Hey, look, we don't know if the evidence is true or not. We shouldn't be throwing people under the bus because some random, person, I don't care if it's man, woman, child, or whatever, makes an accusation against, a well-known individual. Because we don't know what the motive was for making that individual. Look, if you can get, 5 or 6, I said it during the whole Trump situation. If you can get 5 or 6 ladies, I guarantee you give me 1,000 or 10,000 ladies to choose from, I'll find 5 or 6 to say whatever I want them to say if I pay them enough, right? Or pressure them in other ways to say what I want them to say.
Evidence
so you have to
needed.
assume somebody's going to do it. That's what I'm saying. So no matter who it is, you have to say, okay, who's the motive here? What's really going on? And I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus just because somebody made an accusation against them.
Yeah. All right.
I don't care if I like them or not.
Let's do our quiz. I'll start it off first. It's only got a few minutes. So I guess kind of 2 questions and kind of a time period, but when was the highest corporate tax rate in America? And then the second follow-up question is, when was the highest marginal tax rate times? What were the years for those?
I want to say it was in the mid to late 70s. Either that or have to be shortly. It didn't have to be right after World War II. Be one of those.
All right. Kind of both.
World War I, actually.
All right. So here we go. So corporate tax rate was at its highest, kind of around the time of Vietnam, actually, the beginning of Vietnam. So it was around 52.8% in 1968 to 1969, which is massive compared to what it is right now. So everyone wants to complain right now. I'm like, no. Go back to 1970 time, and like they were getting shafted. And for 1944 through 1951, the highest marginal tax rate for individuals was 91%. Part of this, due for the war, right? Makes sense. And then, but it increased 1952 to 53, this is after the war, to 92%, and then went back to 91% from 54 to 63. They were just gouging people with that. This is after the war too. I mean, like, I guess a little bit of the Korean War, but like, man, that hurts. That hurts.
That's the problem with government. You know, they have no problem writing checks.
No one should be complaining right now,
for the
though.
projects they want. Yeah, but what I'm saying is like, like this is the problem with government. Government has no problem writing checks, expecting your ass to cover them.
All right, Kenny, you got 1 minute for your quiz here. I gotta hop off.
What's the meaning of justice?
Of justice?
Yeah.
Oh, I have no idea. I couldn't give you a definition.
Neither could most judges too. So it's the idea of equitable and fairness. A lot of what we've been talking about, especially this show, is over equitable and fairness. And back to a larger context, right? I was looking up something, like J.P. Morgan, I think last year before, got caught rigging, I won't say precious metal market, but it was like over a broader range of like stocks and bonds. And they made supposedly over $1 billion in profits, and they got fined 920 million, right? Or 920 billion. So, yeah. But then you have, you look at, cases like Elisa Johnson, who I think she had like 2 ounces of weed on her. She's a older black lady who was sent to jail for life for 2 ounces. So, and to make it short, I had a longer thing going on this. Yeah. When we look at the justice system today, who was more harmed and affected? J.P. Morgan and all the people, I'd say, was the population hurt more by J.P. Morgan's rigging of the stock market, and taking losses on their accounts, or did the American people suffer under Elisa Johnson, who had maybe 2 ounces of weed in her pocket?
Yeah.
And a lot of what we're seeing today is an issue of people getting the books thrown, especially people of color.
Right.
If you look in through life and you're seeing that your own people is getting, the book thrown at them for 2 ounces of weed, while corporate America, walks down scot-free. Because remember, they made, like even after all the fines, they still walked away with a profit.
Yeah.
Versus somebody else got
we gotta
their
wrap
cars
this
taken
up
away.
here, though. So I gotta hop off.
To make
but
yeah. Next show, maybe we'll go over this where we're gonna have this conversation we're gonna have to have in the future in America. Let's leave it at that.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching, Dave. Welcome back. But please watch the recorded episode on YouTube. Appreciate you guys. And once again, this has been another American Experience.
Hey, thanks for watching the Red, White, and Matt Show with Kenny. Please like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for another American Experience.